So ESPN reported last night, Pete Thamel of ESPN said that a decision on whether or not the expansion of the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournaments will be made in the upcoming weeks, and possibly going from 68 teams to not 70, not 72, not 74, but possibly 76, adding 8 more teams into the mix. And that's where we're going to lead things off here as we are joined by Chip Patterson, CBS Sports. Follow him at Chip_Patterson. Chip, thanks so much for joining us here today here on the Adam Gold Show. Dennis Cox sitting in for Adam Gold. Chip, why does this stink? Going to 76 teams, I think it sucks if they decide to do this.
Oh, I think I push back.
Really?
Okay.
Why? Tell me why I'm wrong, please.
As long as they don't change the calendar.
Okay.
As long as we don't have another weekend of the NCAA tournament.
All right.
My understanding of these expansion plans is more or less to expand Dayton, to expand the play-in games that play into our bracket of 64. And I think that's because the NCAA tournament in the American sports calendar is the perfect amount for our short little attention spans. Mm-hmm. Because if you expand it, I think you lose the casual sports fan that allows the NCAA tournament to sort of have its grip. Because you think about, where the NBA is. The NBA is kind of in that lull before the playoff push really starts. You think about Major League Baseball, it's you're in spring training, but you haven't really gotten started yet. You are about a month after the Super Bowl. You are, maybe if you're diehard into spring practice and spring ball, but even that doesn't really start to take over in terms of newsy developments in football until April. And I just think that if you're going to get, Joe down in accounting, and Claudia, the vice president of accounts receivables, and everybody that doesn't watch sports and everybody that fills out their bracket because of what animal would win and what color is their favorite. I think if you have the NCAA tournament one weekend longer, it's too long.
Yeah.
You've got the first weekend, Sweet 16, Elite 8, and then honestly, a lot of people check out. I mean, we watch the Final Four here in the great state of North Carolina because the people who listen to this unprecedented statewide platform understand that college basketball and the Final Four, national championships, like that is something that we hold in high regard and hold in high esteem. But I just think that if you make the NCAA tournament longer, you will lose some of the audience. It is the 2 weekends of those, the first and second round, and then the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, that is the perfect amount of time to be able to get somebody to parachute into college basketball, think they know everything, watch every single game, and then totally forget about college basketball until February. So my expansion pushback happens with the calendar, not with the count of the teams.
Okay, I'll compromise with you on that one. I think that's my fear, is that 76, when does it eventually become 84? When does it eventually become 96? Like, when eventually do we just make it another weekend? I think that's the fear for me, is that it already is something great that people invest in. But the more you add, I feel like it waters down the product. And that's my biggest fear, is that eventually too much of a good thing is that eventually becomes a bad thing. And I think the NCAA might be pushing itself too far.
I saw in the college football playoff, a lot of people liked having more playoff games. They weren't great, and so they fixed the seeding, but a lot of people were super excited. I had my issues with it. I'm more of a regular season purist myself, but
likewise,
that's never been really the interest in college basketball. I mean, shoot, ACC conference basketball tournament championships are sometimes celebrated beyond even the regular season title. Like, you win the regular season title in ACC basketball, it's like, oh yeah, that's a nice banner. Mm-hmm. That's a nice trophy. You do cut down nets, but what feels like the real championship? The NC State men's basketball program, we were ACC champions. Well, not in the regular season. You were playing on Tuesday in the ACC tournament.
You were.
But you won the conference tournament, and so you were the champions. It is that tournament play that is part of, basketball at its highest level. So I think that for the NCAA tournament and sort of where it sits in the national consciousness, if you were to expand it by another weekend, I think that's a little bit too much. I think that in growing. It just leads. It is too much in line with everything else we've seen in college sports, which is anything that will be able to, like, all right, are you a connoisseur of olive oil?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so about like first press, second press, third press, the ways that you get from virgin to extra virgin, all the different levels to it. Like we are beyond our third press of the olive in college sports. And so I think that it falls in line with what I've seen across the industry, the expansion, because it just means more across the board in every single Excel spreadsheet.
Chip Patterson, CBS Sports. Give him a follow at Chip_Patterson. You mentioned the ACC. When I see the expansion of the NCAA tournament, or the possible expansion of the NCAA tournament, for me, I feel like schools like Wake Forest or NC State, if the tournament expands, there's no excuse for missing the tournament now. If you're some of these kind of mid-tier programs or even like a Pitt, there's no reason why you should miss the tournament anymore. If they're expanding by 8 schools, you should be in it every single year. Like the standard for some of these programs is going to have to change.
Well, that's also why I think it's expanding, because the thought is you're going to fill it with Rutgers. You're going to fill it with Pitt. You're going to fill it with power conference programs that might have less than impressive conference records. Maybe we are going to get some more power conference programs with somewhat flimsy resumes. It's going to change the way you schedule. It's going to change your goals. I still think making it to the NCAA tournament and then winning in the NCAA tournament are worthy goals for every single ACC program.
Sure.
So, absolutely. It's funny. Do you know where we're going to see it first, Dennis?
What's that? Coaching
contracts.
Yeah.
Because coaching contracts have bonuses for different levels of achievement. And so there is a coach, many coaches probably, who signed contracts in college football for a bonus to make the college football playoff that was written when the top 4 teams made the college football playoff. And now are we rewriting it? Does Josh Heupel at Tennessee, does he still get the 4-team playoff level of bonus money for making a 12-team playoff and getting your doors blown off at Ohio State? One and done. See ya, Tennessee, in the college football playoff. So yeah, you want to talk about the standards and how they're going to change or how they need to change. One place we will start to see that with how the coaches are rewarded or held to those changing standards if it doesn't in fact expand.
Yeah, and we might see is a little bit of less base salary, more incentive. You never know. That's a great question. There's going to be a trickle down effect for sure. Chip Patterson, CBS Sports. Speaking of contracts and coaches, we did see with Bill Belichick's contract that was released to us about 6 months ago or so, that revenue sharing for football at North Carolina is going to be $13 million. And what we saw in his contract, I don't know if that may have been adjusted or how that's necessarily going to work overall, but we did see Bubba Cunningham earlier this week announce that 4 sports at North Carolina are going to receive revenue sharing money. It's going to be football, men's and women's basketball, as well as baseball. I'm curious, Chip, from what we've seen some schools announce, like Ohio State's doing 4 sports. We've seen some schools say, hey, 6 sports are going to get some revenue share. Are teams or schools just really just kind of figuring this out on the fly in terms of how much we're going to give, what sports we're going to give, and are we just going to see things just really annually just be redone every year by schools?
Well, no, it's not on the fly right now.
Yeah.
People that we had talked to had put together their budgets and their spreadsheets all the way back to March or April, because the time for the House settlement, like when it could have gone through, was a long time ago. And so athletic departments, athletic directors, they had already made these decisions a while ago. And so, it could be evaluated on a year-to-year basis. Now, as to the number of sports, which sports you select, one of the sort of general philosophies of revenue sharing is that you are sharing revenue from your media rights deals.
Yeah.
So what sports are the sports that are getting featured for the University of North Carolina, for ACC schools? What are the ones that are getting featured on ESPN and the ACC network? Like, what are the sports that are really driving home the revenue and the value of that contract with Disney? Like it is the sports that were mentioned right there. So I think the fact that it was football, men's, women's basketball, and baseball, like those are the prominent sports from a media rights perspective. So with the idea being that you are sharing some of the media rights pie with the players, similar to the way a professional league would, then it makes total sense. Those are the ones that North Carolina selected. Now, will it be, a shifting, changing number on a year-to-year basis? Maybe. But when we talk about these sports, we also understand that this is the base level of your roster salary, like your roster salary that is not a roster salary, because the revenue share, your $13 million for North Carolina football, since that's what you just mentioned, is the base level. And then there is NIL that can go on top of that as well to be able to make things work. So, I am anticipating that if $13 million is the revenue share from North Carolina football, the total roster spending is a number that is larger than that. And I think that that's going to be the case at a lot of places, especially the ones that are trying to compete at a top 25 or higher level.
Speaking of NIL, I'm sure there are other sports, and I'm sure North Carolina had to factor this in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure every sport is doing this. Is with NIL, there might be, like, for example, their women's soccer team just won a national championship. Their women's lacrosse team just won a national championship. Their field hockey team is phenomenal, has won 5 of the last 7 national championships. I'm sure there probably schools are looking at, hey, you know what? These sports are going to be taken care of financially with NIL. Plus, you have increase of scholarships. North Carolina is increasing their scholarship limit. That in and of itself, for non-revenue sports or for non-head count sports, being able to put athletes on full scholarship is just a financial benefit to these athletes in and of itself as well. But that's also a revenue gap that has to still be made up by these universities, whether it's naming rights to stadiums, selling advertising spots on their football fields, whatever it might be. Schools are going to have to get creative in terms of how they still generate the money in order to fill the gap.
Yeah, or cut sports.
North Carolina said they're keeping all 28.
Yeah. It's not happening everywhere.
That's very true.
You were flying to that conference soccer game, and now you're taking a bus.
Yeah.
You were staying in a nice little 4-star with a convention center. Now you're staying at a motel. No, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to trash any hotel chains on here, but you're at
a 3-star with the continental breakfast with waffle iron.
Yeah,
I get it.
like there's going to be a lot of different ways that that gap ends up being made up. But again, the thing that is really important, I think, for fans to understand is that while the world seems to be changing in technicality with the rules, there has been such a long run up to this. I mean, 1 year or more of planning with even an understanding of what kind of number we'd be talking about with $20.5 million to be distributed across all of your different sports. North Carolina at 13 is on the lower end. I 13 to 16 or 17 is my understanding in college football. And again, that's just sort of your base with where then you come over top. Because I tell you what, if they passed around the hat in the NIL no rev share era and they were able to collect 15, 16, 17 million dollars, well, they're not expecting to take much less when they pass the hat around once again. So now all of a sudden we're looking at rosters that in total might be upwards in the lands of $25, $30 million with rev share and NIL on top of it. So I think that you are always going to be able to do whatever you are motivated to do. There are extreme NIL examples in softball. There are extreme NIL examples in all kinds of non-revenue sports. Because there is a desire to be able to be that great. So at the University of North Carolina, I think they should be able to plug the holes. I think they should be able to figure these things out. I know that recent documents revealed that some of the teachers, some of the faculty at North Carolina is like, well, why can we not get this lab funded? But now all of a sudden we're giving out $20.5 million to the athletes. Make that make sense.
Yeah.
So it's friction everywhere. I've heard stories of coaches that are their athletic directors are having to keep coaches for fighting over scraps. I mean, it's a really, really tough scenario, and one that is sort of happening because some of it is, as you said, being figured out on the fly.
Chip Patterson, CBS Sports, joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. Dennis Cox sitting in for Adam Gold this afternoon. Victoria Vonecker producing the show. I did see that earlier this week, or maybe it was last week, that the Big 12 and has have a bit of a partnership with CBS. I think it might be some of the sub-licensing agreement with ESPN was for some basketball games. I remember the Big 12 commissioner, I think it was last year, was discussing possibly unbundling their media rights for sports. Like, for example, selling football or maybe basketball separately from all the other sports. If we see an unbundle potentially in the future, maybe 5-6 years from now, would that be a gateway for power conference football to break away from their current media contracts and kind of sell it in and of itself together like we see the NFL sells its media rights? Do you see that possibly happening down the line? And that way that revenue that is generated from football directly can be funneled directly to football players?
I think it would only work through the college football playoff.
Okay.
I've heard a lot because the NCAA doesn't really run college football's postseason and has not run college football's postseason for a very long time. The college football playoff is an individual entity that, while it is literally the same universities and the same conference commissioners that also sit on all these boards and run the NCAA, it is operating totally unto itself. Men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, all the other Olympic sports are all still tied to the NCAA at the highest levels. But the television contract for the college football playoff and the college football playoff itself are all sort of running together. So if you want to talk about any kind of breakaway, it would be through the college football playoff. The idea that it would no longer be FBS or 1A subdivision, that it would just be the college football playoff division. Yeah. Something along those lines. And that's where, the idea about unbundling and selling different TV rights, I will say that there is, a lot of value to be had across the board for the way that conferences do strike up these deals and do try to, work with their media rights partners. Sometimes it works out really well, sometimes less so. But I would say that if you want to look at a football breakaway, the vehicle that it can get done is through the CFP.
I'm curious to see where all this is going to go. I think no one really knows. It's constantly moving. It's constantly evolving, Chip. And I don't know. In all honesty, it feels like for us as fans, we are starting to see some of the things or many of the things that we enjoyed, especially here in the state of North Carolina, from either a football or basketball standpoint, are kind of starting to go away. The fact that NC State and North Carolina and men's basketball aren't playing each other twice this season is mind-boggling. But that's where we're going now in college sports. The things that made it great, we're no longer getting in some ways. In terms of rivalries Oklahoma State don't play each other in football anymore. To me, you're taking away the things that makes college sports so great and all this pursuit for money. And I don't know if the health of college sports is going to be in a good place years from now.
So I had a conversation this morning with Dia Bell.
Okay.
Dia Bell is a 5-star quarterback in the class of 2026.
All right.
He is committed to the Texas Longhorns. He is the son of Raja Bell. And to hear him talk about the way that he is excited he is helping recruit the recruiting class. Like Dennis, it's the idealized conversation that you would have had 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I talk to these kids and they don't sound that different. The world that they grow up in is wildly different.
Very much
the
true.
Experiences that they've had. But the ones that are really driven, the ones that are put together well, they still make you remember why you love college sports. Dennis, you take that walk into a stadium, you smell the smells, you hear the marching band, you see the people together. I can't speak to every sport. I keep echoing football because it's the sport that I cover the closest and the sport that I know the best. But the community that is tens of thousands of people getting together in one place where many of them have been getting together for decades or generations, like those. Everyone freaks out about how college sports is ending and not being able to necessarily know who's on the team, especially in basketball. I get that frustration, but take yourself to an event, look these kids in the eye, watch the competition on the field. It's still awesome because every single time I've talked to college players, whether it's college football playoff expansion, conference realignment, they don't care. When do we play? Like, look, just tell me when to play. And
fair point.
If you really love the competition, the next generations and the generations that are coming up now, like they still love that competition. So I am not doom and gloom about college sports because college sports ultimately comes down to the humans, and the humans involved still care.
That's a fair point. I mean, I'm a former college athlete myself. I still get flashbacks and goosebumps anytime I even go to cover a game. I'm like, man, I remember these game days. I remember that feeling, and it doesn't go away. You're right. I just think from a fan perspective of, like, again, I'll bring up the fact that State and Carolina aren't playing each other twice in basketball.
Hey, no, talk to your coaches. I'm not trying to say, like, email your local legislators here. But if you want to look at like who can actually like change that, it is the head coach, head coaches at NC State and North Carolina, because they are in control more so than football coaches are. Basketball coaches are in control of that non-conference schedule. NC State's playing Virginia in September this year, and that is not an ACC game in football. And so, I mean, we've seen it with North Carolina and Wake Forest in football. You could absolutely put together a game between the two rivals and have it be a non-conference game. So I get that, the ACC trying to reduce its conference schedule has had many casualties, among them not getting a home and home between North Carolina and NC State. But that problem is the most fixable of the many problems that we have mentioned here in the last, 15 minutes or so.
That's a good point. I'll end on this, Chip. I don't know if Will Wade and Hubert Davis are on speaking terms, especially after Will Wade threw shade at Hubert Davis for how they didn't use Van Allen Lubin at a recent gathering. So I don't know if those two are on speaking terms, so we'll have to wait and see on that one, Chip. Chip, thanks so much for your time. Give him a follow at Chip_Patterson. Check him out, his work on CBSSports.com and CBS Sports HQ. Chip, thank you. Appreciate it, my man.
Sounds good. Y'all be well.